A couple of years ago, my eldest son, aged about 6 at the time, said to me, "Daddy, when I'm older, I want to be an architect, so we can be architects together." It stopped me dead in my tracks, and I didn't know what to say, so I gave him a hug and told him I loved him. It occurred to me that I didn't want to encourage my son to be an architect, and I began to wonder why. On the face of it, my career in architecture has been a success. I've run my own practice since 2009 and grown my reputation to the point where I can choose my clients. My buildings have won some awards and been shortlisted for others. They have been published in national newspapers and featured on global websites. One has been listed by my professional body as being among the best homes in the country, and my practice has been included in a top 100 list by a prestigious national publication 5 years running. So why would I be reluctant to encourage my son to follow my footsteps? Do I regret being an architect? No, I don't, but it's complicated. I consider myself extraordinarily fortunate. I avoided so many pitfalls in my career, and I know I am very lucky to be where I am. I also know that many other people weren't so lucky. I got assistance at just the right time to make a difference, but others did not. To be honest, I sometimes feel guilty about it. My own experience tells me the odds of becoming a successful architect are stacked against anyone starting out in this profession. The thought of my child deciding to roll that dice fills me with dread. It all started when I was a student. There were 81 people in my first year, and after 6 years of study, only 16 of the original class graduated. That was high in comparison to other cohorts, but not unusual. I came close to dropping out myself, and looking back, if someone had told my classmates that I would one day create award-winning architecture, I feel sure they would have laughed. I'm pretty sure I would have laughed with them. Very few of my classmates failed their exams. Most chose to drop out, often because they were disillusioned and decided architecture wasn't for them. I had close friends who dropped out, and I don't think they were given enough support by the school at the time. At university, there were star students, the ones the tutors believed were destined for greatness. And then there was the rest of us. I knew I wasn't good enough as a designer. I just wanted a career as a competent builder, and I did not aspire to anything more. Just after I got my final degree results, I was called by a firm of architects. They were given my number by one of my tutors, and they asked me to an interview. I had no idea my tutor had done that, but I had nothing else planned, so I sat the interview and got the job. The firm were a large corporate practice with several offices around the country. I was put onto a program of refurbishing job centres, unemployment offices where people could claim welfare payments. The firm had the contract to refurbish every one of these offices in the country over several years. It wasn't glamorous, but I learned lessons that I still use to this day. After a year with that firm, I moved on to a smaller practice. My expectation was that a small firm would give me more hands-on experience. Let's just say I got more than I bargained for. Lots of people encounter toxic work environments. It's not unique to architecture, but this place was terrible. The staff turnover was higher than McDonald's. People just kept quitting, and I was given their jobs to run. Looking back, I was so inexperienced I didn't even know how inexperienced I was. During all this, I was working towards my registration as an architect in the UK by taking the examination in professional studies and management. I could make a whole video on the process, but it involves keeping a logbook with at least 24 months experience, sitting an exam that goes on for 48 hours, writing a case study on a project, and then being interviewed by experienced architects who review all of this and try to find gaps in the candidate's knowledge. It's stressful enough for most people, but my employer insisted I remove the names of all the people and companies involved in my case study. He was paranoid the architects reviewing my application would learn more about his firm than he wanted them to know. Stupidly, I did as he asked. The first question my interviewers had was whether my case study had been made up. I failed my first attempt to become a registered architect. I was lucky that in adversity I made some good friends. Several of them had already left the firm and introduced me to a very capable recruitment agent. She set up an interview with a really great company. I continued to work towards my professional registration and my new firm supported me. I was pretty sure that if I ever left this company, it would be to work for a property developer rather than another architecture firm. I had met several architects who had gone over to the dark side and were doing very well out of it. I had no aspiration to become a sole practitioner. Then the Great Recession hit. One night, my boss asked me to stay late so he could go over my case study to check if it would stand up to scrutiny in my interview. I knew he was busy and we both had other places to be, but we spent a few hours going over the document until he was satisfied. The next morning, the firm's owners laid off most of the staff, including me. My boss had known it was coming, and his help made sure I passed that exam. It was November 2008. The economy had tanked, almost every architect I knew had lost their job, and no firms were hiring. I had bought a house earlier that year and had taken out mortgage insurance. This would only kick in if I signed on at a job centre. So every week I went to a building I had helped refurbish just a few years before to claim unemployment benefit. After 2 months of looking fruitlessly for work, I decided to become self-employed. In my mind, I had hit career rock bottom, so anything was better than this. I imagined I would try it out for a few months and keep looking for a real job in the meantime. As soon as I told my friends that I had set up on my own, a former colleague called me up. He knew a guy who ran a small construction business, and they needed someone to do planning and building warrant applications for house extensions. That phone call literally made my career. The work I got from those builders paid my bills until I had established my practice. A few years afterwards, on the day after my eldest son was born, I was in the maternity ward with my wife. I struck up a conversation with an orderly who told me her daughter was married to a guy at the firm that laid me off during the recession. He was still working there, but had to accept 2 large pay cuts in order to keep his job. I knew then I had made the right choice to become self-employed and that I could never go back. In 23 years of studying and working in this profession, I've only known one architect whose parent was also an architect. It isn't common for the offspring of architects to follow the same career. Maybe their parents tell them to avoid it, maybe they decide against it on their own. Who knows? What I do know is that this profession can be very fulfilling, but for some people it can be terrible. I've met numerous middle-aged architects who told me that if they had known what a career in architecture was actually like, they would never have chosen to pursue it. I know that I got where I am because a few older architects gave me the help I needed at crucial points in my career. I didn't ask for their help, and at the time, I didn't realize how important it would be. I also know that this kind of help is not evenly distributed, that some people fall through the cracks because no one is looking out for them. I've always worked alone, never hiring staff, so I haven't been able to help other young architects in the same way I was helped. Part of the reason I started this channel is to pay that debt to my profession and help in any way I can. If either of my boys decide to pursue a career in architecture, of course I will support them, but they will walk into it with their eyes open. I hope this channel will help anyone watching to do the same.